When the first message came from the stars, the world went silent. Scientists, soldiers, and even children stared at their screens as a strange signal repeated again and again, in a rhythm that no one had ever heard before. It wasn't random noise. It was communication. The message came from a fleet of alien ships that had entered the edge of the solar system, and for the first time in human history, the question of whether we were alone in the universe was answered. The governments of Earth formed a single team of experts to respond. People called it the Global Contact Council. Every major nation sent its brightest minds: scientists, linguists, military officers, and even psychologists. Their task was simple but terrifying: talk to the beings who had crossed the stars. The first transmissions were cautious. The aliens spoke in perfect mathematical patterns, then slowly began to use human languages, copied from our radio and satellite signals. They called themselves the Aerith, and they came from a world that orbited 2 suns far beyond our galaxy. At first, humans expected the usual science fiction story: aliens coming to conquer, to enslave, or to save. But the Aerith were polite and curious. They said they came in peace. They wanted to study us, to understand how life had evolved on a planet so dangerous that their scientists called it the Death World. That name caught everyone's attention. For humans, Earth was home. For the Aerith, it was something terrifying. The aliens explained that most planets capable of life were calm, stable places. Their own world had soft winds, gentle temperatures, and oceans that never raged with storms. Earth, by comparison, was chaos. It had deserts that could boil a man alive, oceans that could swallow continents, jungles filled with venom, and winters so cruel they froze entire regions solid. To the Aerith, it was unbelievable that intelligent life could not only survive here, but also build civilizations, art, and technology. When the first Aerith ship landed on Earth, it didn't come down in a crowded city or near a government base. It touched down quietly on a salt flat in South America. A team of human scientists went to greet them, dressed in protective suits, unsure if they could even breathe the same air. The ship opened like a blooming flower, and from it stepped tall, thin creatures with smooth, silver-blue skin that shimmered in the sunlight. Their large black eyes moved quickly, taking in every detail. They wore no helmets, no weapons, only small, glowing devices attached to their arms. The aliens bowed slightly, a gesture of peace. Cameras from across the world broadcasted the event live. Billions of people watched as the first human, Dr. Leah Morgan, an astrophysicist, stepped forward and said softly, "Welcome to Earth." The aliens responded, their voices calm and musical. "We come to witness the miracle of your survival." The phrase "miracle of survival" became famous overnight. News channels repeated it. Children wrote it in their school notebooks, and scientists debated what it truly meant. Why did they see us as a miracle? Soon, humanity learned that the Aerith had been studying our planet for decades. They knew about the dinosaurs that had been wiped out by an asteroid, the ice ages that froze the planet, the plagues and wars that nearly ended us, and yet, every time, life on Earth came back stronger. The Aerith had never experienced death or pain as humans did. Their world had no predators, no diseases, no major natural disasters. They lived long, peaceful lives with no violence. When they looked at humans, they saw a species that faced pain and destruction at every turn, yet refused to give up. They wanted to understand what made us keep fighting. To learn this, they proposed an exchange. They would share some of their medical and energy technology, in return for permission to study how humans adapted to extreme environments. They wanted to see how our bodies and minds worked under pressure. The Global Contact Council agreed, though many were suspicious. Some thought the aliens wanted to find our weaknesses. Others believed they were genuinely fascinated. The first observation site was chosen carefully: Antarctica. It was one of the harshest places on Earth, a land of endless ice and wind where even machines struggled to survive. The Aerith saw it as the perfect test. A joint base was built, half human, half alien, standing like a bright metal island in a sea of white snow. When the Aerith arrived there, they were shocked before the experiments even began. They expected humans to be cautious, fragile, afraid of the cold. Instead, they found laughter. The human team sang songs while unloading cargo, played snowball fights during breaks, and even joked about losing feeling in their fingers. The aliens couldn't understand this behavior. To them, danger was something to avoid at all costs, yet these humans faced it with smiles. Dr. Leah Morgan became the main point of contact with the Aerith scientists. She explained that humor was part of how humans survived. When things were tough, people laughed not because they didn't feel fear, but because it helped them face it. The Aerith listened carefully, their dark eyes wide as if she were describing magic. They recorded everything: heartbeat data, oxygen levels, skin temperatures. But none of it explained the spirit they saw in the humans. One alien named Karth became especially close to the human crew. He asked endless questions about human pain, fear, and dreams. He couldn't believe that humans had built cities even in deserts and mountains. One night, standing under the shimmering lights of the southern aurora, Karth said to Leah, "Your species lives in a world that tries to kill you every day. Yet you smile, you laugh, you love. How do you do that?" Leah thought for a long time before answering. "Because," she said, "we learned that nothing worth having comes easy. We were born on a hard planet, so we became hard too, but we never forgot how to care." That answer became famous later, but at that moment, it was just a quiet exchange between two beings from very different worlds. The Aerith wrote in their reports that humans had something their language could barely describe: a force of will, a drive to live even when logic said it was impossible. The days passed quickly at the Antarctic base. The aliens studied how humans adapted to freezing temperatures, high winds, and isolation. They were astonished by how quickly humans adjusted. When the alien machines failed to function in the cold, humans found simple ways to fix them using tape, metal scraps, and fire. They turned problems into puzzles and disasters into challenges. The Aerith were amazed. But even as they admired humanity, there was unease among the humans. Some soldiers guarding the base whispered that the aliens were watching more than they admitted. They believed the Aerith wanted to measure not just our endurance, but our limits. Others dismissed these fears as paranoia. After all, the aliens had shared technology that cured diseases and cleaned polluted air. They seemed honest. Still, strange questions remained. Why did the Aerith call us Deathworlders with both fear and respect in their voices? Why did they seem nervous when observing our survival techniques? And why, despite all their advanced science, did they avoid even the smallest injury? As if they had never seen blood before. One evening, as the sun dipped below the icy horizon, the first sign of a great storm appeared. The sky turned violet, the wind began to howl, and the communication systems flickered. The humans looked up, familiar with what was coming. The Aerith looked terrified. They had never seen weather so violent. Leah Morgan tried to calm them. "It's just a blizzard," she said, smiling as she pulled on her coat. But to the Aerith, the idea that someone could say just a blizzard was beyond comprehension. For them, this was madness, a world that could turn against its own inhabitants at any moment. As the storm began to rise, the aliens gathered their equipment, still trying to understand how these strange creatures called humans could live on such a deadly world, and yet act as if it were normal. They didn't know it yet. But the coming storm would soon show them the truth, the full, terrible, and magnificent power of what it meant to be a Deathworlder. And when that day came, they would never look at humans the same way again. The next morning, the sky over Antarctica was white and endless. The cold bit through every layer of clothing, and even the strongest humans felt its sting. The alien team from the Aerith fleet had never seen anything like it. On their home planet, temperatures were always calm and balanced, and the idea of ice or freezing winds was unknown. Their sensors told them that no life should be possible in such a place. Yet there they stood, surrounded by humans who worked, laughed, and lived as if the cold were nothing but another daily challenge. The experiment was finally beginning. The plan was simple. The aliens wanted to study how humans managed to survive in extreme conditions. They wanted to see not only what the human body could handle, but also what the human mind could endure. To them, endurance wasn't just strength, it was a mystery. They had read human history and seen endless wars, disasters, and tragedies. What confused them most was not that humans suffered, but that they always got up again. At the joint base, the humans worked in groups of 6. They were scientists, engineers, and survival experts. Every team had at least one alien observer watching their activities, recording every movement, every reaction. The base looked like a collection of silver domes connected by tunnels, half buried under snow. Inside, heaters hummed softly, lights glowed warm, and the walls were covered with frost where the heat met the cold. The first test was simple. Both species were to collect ice samples from outside to study water structure and bacteria life. For the Aerith, it was purely scientific. For the humans, it was another day in the field. The alien team wore glowing thermal suits with energy shields around them, designed to block the freezing air. The humans, on the other hand, wore heavy jackets, goggles, and boots, moving through the snow with ease. When the wind picked up and snow began to swirl, the Aerith paused. Their instruments showed danger levels increasing. They hesitated, unsure if it was safe to continue. Then they looked at the humans, who were laughing and shouting to one another through the storm. A man named Diego even took off his glove for a second to feel the wind on his skin. The aliens couldn't understand it. To them, this behavior seemed insane. Why risk pain or damage for no reason? Inside their helmets, the Aerith spoke to each other in their melodic language. "They do not fear," said one. "They should be retreating." Another replied, "Perhaps they do not feel cold as we do." But the truth was, humans did feel the cold. They just didn't let it stop them. When the teams returned, the aliens immediately scanned the humans for frostbite or injury. They found none, only flushed cheeks and laughing faces. Leah Morgan explained to them, "We've lived with the cold for thousands of years. Our ancestors crossed frozen lands long before machines existed. We just got used to it." The Aerith were fascinated. They began to take deeper biological readings, testing heart rates, body temperature, and oxygen use. But still, the data didn't explain what they were seeing. Humans didn't just survive, they adapted emotionally. They joked, they sang. They found ways to make the impossible bearable. Later that day, a new exercise was announced. The teams were to build emergency shelters using only limited tools. The Aerith had brought advanced building drones and energy shields, while the humans had old-fashioned shovels, metal sheets, and rope. When the challenge began, the aliens quickly set up their structures using light-based technology. Within an hour, their shelters glowed softly, perfectly sealed and warm. The humans, however, took a different approach. They worked slowly but cleverly. They dug trenches, built snow walls, and used the environment instead of fighting it. The aliens watched with curiosity as the humans laughed through their mistakes and learned from each one. A young engineer named Aisha showed the aliens how to make an igloo using only snow blocks. "The trick," she said, smiling, "is to let the snow work with you, not against you." Karth, the alien scientist who had become close to Leah, crouched beside her as she cut a block of ice. "Why do you make things so difficult?" he asked. "You could use our technology and finish faster," Aisha shrugged. "Because next time your technology might not be here. We always prepare for the worst." That answer stayed in Karth's mind. On his world, there was no worst. There was no hunger, no danger, no need to fight or struggle. The Aerith didn't prepare for disasters because they had never known any. Watching humans build shelters out of nothing showed him something he couldn't put into words. Something powerful. Something ancient. Over the next few days, the experiments became harder. The temperature dropped even lower and the wind grew stronger. The aliens' equipment began to malfunction. Energy shields flickered. Batteries drained faster than expected and communication signals weakened. The humans, however, adapted instantly. They used spare cables, solar batteries, even cooking stoves to keep the systems running. When an alien drone froze and fell from the air, a mechanic named Raj fixed it using nothing but a screwdriver, some cloth, and body heat. The Aerith watched with amazement. On their planet, if a machine failed, it was replaced. Humans, however, repaired things, even when they were broken beyond reason. At dinner time, the humans shared their meals with the aliens. The food was simple, canned soup, bread, and dried fruit, but the Aerith had never eaten anything so full of flavor. Their own nutrition came from tasteless energy capsules. They were puzzled by the humans' habit of laughing, talking, and sharing food as if it were a celebration. Leah explained that food for humans wasn't just energy. It was comfort, connection, and culture. That night, as the wind howled outside the base, the aliens gathered their data. Their leader, a tall Aerith named Valan, reviewed the findings with concern. "They should be fragile," he said. "Their world is poison, their air unstable, their bodies imperfect. Yet they are stronger than we calculated." Karth replied quietly, "Maybe it's not their bodies that make them strong." The next morning, another test began, this time focused on teamwork under pressure. The humans and aliens were asked to complete a task together. Transport a large generator across a field of unstable ice. The aliens relied on scanners and mathematical precision to predict safe paths, while the humans used instinct. Watch how the ice cracks, Diego explained. You can hear it before it breaks. Halfway through, the scanner suddenly failed, leaving the aliens unsure of where to step. Panic spread among them, but the humans reacted calmly. They linked arms, moved slowly, and guided the aliens step by step across the frozen field. Every time the ice groaned, a human stomped lightly to test its strength. The aliens couldn't believe the confidence they saw in faces turning red from the cold. When they reached the other side, one of the Aerith looked at his trembling hands and said softly, "We would not have made it without them." That evening, the atmosphere in the base changed. The Aerith no longer saw the humans as mere subjects. They saw them as partners, creatures of impossible courage. They began to ask deeper questions, not about biology, but about emotion. "Why do you risk yourselves?" they asked. "Why not stay safe in your warm cities?" Leah smiled and said, "Because life doesn't happen in comfort. We grow when we struggle. We learn when we fail." The Aerith listened carefully. On their world, they had evolved past conflict and hardship. They had no concept of failure or loss. Hearing those words made them uneasy but curious. Maybe, they thought, strength wasn't the absence of pain. It was the ability to move through it. One night, a storm warning appeared on the monitors. The human crew began securing the base, checking doors and sealing tunnels. The aliens followed their lead, though fear was clear in their movements. The wind outside howled like a living beast, shaking the walls. Snow rose in waves, covering everything in white. During the storm, power flickered. The heaters went out for several minutes. The temperature dropped fast and frost began to form on the walls inside the base. The aliens froze in panic, unsure what to do. But the humans moved quickly. Leah and Raj ran to the generator room, while Aisha gathered everyone into the main hall to stay close for warmth. They wrapped blankets around the aliens and made sure none of them were alone. When the lights finally came back on, one of the Aerith was crying, though they had no word for tears in their language. "You saved us," he said. Leah replied gently, "That's what humans do. We take care of each other." After the storm passed, the aliens spent hours reviewing what they had seen. They couldn't understand why humans helped others even when it brought no reward. On their world, every action had logic and reason. Here, in the frozen heart of Earth, they saw something beyond logic, something they began to call the Deathworlder spirit. They came to Earth expecting to study strength. Instead, they found kindness, humor, and a will that refused to break. Each test each day made them see humanity in a new light. The aliens had advanced technology in perfect order. But humans had something they didn't, a burning force that kept them alive no matter what the world threw at them. The experiment had only just begun, but already, the Aerith felt small in front of these strange, fragile creatures who laughed in the face of death. They had come to teach, but they were the ones learning. And deep down, every alien in that frozen base began to realize that maybe the galaxy's most dangerous species wasn't dangerous because of weapons or power, but because nothing in the universe could make them give up. The storm came without warning. One moment, the sky above Antarctica was clear, a vast white field shining under the sun, and the next, dark clouds rolled in like a wall. The wind began to scream, shaking the walls of the research base. Snow flew in all directions, turning the world outside into a blur of white chaos. The alien sensors went wild, flashing red with alerts in their strange musical language. The humans, however, had seen this kind of storm before. They moved fast but stayed calm, shouting orders, securing doors, checking fuel, and making sure no one was outside. The Aerith had never experienced anything like it. On their home planet, weather was controlled and peaceful. They didn't even have words for blizzard, frostbite, or avalanche. The sudden power of the storm terrified them. The walls of the base groaned, and the ground itself seemed to shake under the wind's fury. Inside, humans and aliens gathered in the main hall, their faces lit by emergency lights that flickered every few seconds. Leah Morgan, the lead human scientist, tried to stay composed. "Everyone remain calm," she said loudly. "We've been through worse storms before." Her voice carried confidence, but deep inside she knew this storm was different. The pressure readings were off the charts, and the magnetic field readings showed strange spikes. Something about this wasn't natural. The Aerith leader, Valan, stepped forward, his long fingers trembling. This force is unnatural. The air is full of interference. Our ships above cannot respond." His voice shook. The idea of losing contact with their fleet frightened the Aerith more than the cold ever could. They had always relied on their machines, their control, their perfection, but now the storm was tearing that control apart. The power suddenly went out. The base went dark, and only the sound of the howling wind filled the silence. Then came a loud crash from outside. Something had broken. Leah grabbed a flashlight and pointed it at the ceiling. Ice was beginning to form inside the air vents. The temperature dropped rapidly. "Generator room," she shouted. "Raj, Diego, with me." As the humans rushed into the storm to reach the backup power, the Aerith stared after them in shock. "They will die," one of them cried. Karth, who had grown close to Leah, stood frozen, torn between fear and curiosity. He could not understand why they were running into danger instead of waiting for help. Outside, the storm was madness. Snow whipped across their faces, cutting like glass. The world had no shape, only wind and white. Leah could barely see Diego a few feet ahead. Their radio signals crackled with static. "Keep moving," she shouted. "Follow the rope." They had tied themselves together so they wouldn't lose each other. Inside the base, the aliens tried to stabilize the temperature with their energy devices, but the machines were failing. Their technology wasn't built for such extreme cold. Screens went black, data vanished, and their protective suits began to lose power. The alien scientists, who had always been calm and logical, now huddled together in panic. "Our shields are collapsing," Valan said, his voice trembling. "If the humans do not return soon, we will freeze." Karth looked at the door, then back at the frightened faces of his people. He remembered Leah's words. "We always prepare for the worst." For the first time in his life, he made a choice without calculation. He grabbed a heavy coat and ran outside. The moment he stepped into the storm, the cold hit him like fire. His breath froze in seconds, his eyes watered, and his body screamed in pain. But he kept moving, following the faint sound of voices. He saw figures in the distance, 3 humans struggling to pull open a metal door covered in ice. "Karth," Leah shouted when she saw him. "What are you doing out here?" "I came to help," he yelled over the roar of the wind. He grabbed a metal bar and began helping them pry open the door. His thin alien hands shook violently, but he didn't stop. Together, they forced the door open, revealing the frozen generator inside. Inside the small room, frost covered every surface. The fuel line had frozen solid. Leah and Raj started working immediately, using small heaters and tools to thaw the pipes. Karth watched in amazement as the humans worked with bleeding fingers, their faces pale but determined. "You will die if you stay too long," he warned. Leah looked at him and smiled weakly. "Then we die trying." The words hit him harder than the cold. He didn't understand them, yet something inside him did. On his world, no one ever risked their life for others. It was considered madness. But these humans, these Deathworlders, did it without hesitation. Minutes felt like hours. The wind roared outside and the walls creaked. Then, with a sudden spark, the generator roared to life. The lights flickered on across the base. A cheer echoed through the radio. "Power restored!" Raj shouted. But as they turned to leave, part of the ceiling cracked. Ice and metal came crashing down. Leah pushed Karth out of the way, taking the hit on her shoulder. She fell to the ground with a cry of pain. Karth knelt beside her, his hands shaking. "You are hurt," he said. "You saved me." Leah gritted her teeth, holding her shoulder. "We all save each other. That's how we live." With Diego's help, they carried her back through the storm. The rope nearly snapped in the wind, but somehow they made it back to the base. When they stumbled through the door covered in ice, the aliens gasped. They had never seen such raw physical endurance. Leah collapsed, exhausted, but she smiled. "Told you. We'd make it." The aliens surrounded her, scanning her injuries and trying to heal her with their devices. For a moment, no one spoke. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside something had changed. The aliens saw with their own eyes what no data could describe. Bilan spoke quietly, almost to himself. "We thought we were the advanced ones, but we could not have done what they did." Hours passed. The storm showed no sign of stopping. The Aerith had to rely entirely on human systems to survive. The humans checked every vent, sealed cracks, and shared their heat sources. Some even gave up their blankets to keep the aliens warm. Karth stayed near Leah as she rested. He studied her hand, frozen, bruised, but steady. "Why do you always fight the impossible?" he asked softly. She opened her eyes and said, "Because sometimes the impossible is worth fighting for." Outside, the storm grew worse. One of the Aerith ships orbiting above Earth tried to send a rescue signal, but was struck by the magnetic interference. It crashed several kilometers away from the base. The humans didn't hesitate. "We need to find them," Raj said. "They won't last an hour out there." The aliens were shocked. "You cannot go," Valan warned. "It is death." Leah, even with her injured shoulder, stood up slowly. "Then we go fast." They prepared a small rescue team, 3 humans and 2 aliens, including Karth. The storm was still raging, but they knew there was no time to lose. They tied themselves together again and followed the beacon from the crashed ship. Visibility was almost zero. The snow was so thick it felt like walking through a wall. After hours of struggling, they found the wreck. The alien craft was half buried in snow, smoke rising from a broken wing. Inside, they found 4 Aerith crew members, weak and terrified. The humans broke the door open and pulled them out one by one. "Move!" Leah shouted. "We can't stay here." Karth watched as the humans carried his people through the blizzard, one on each back, step by step through the killing cold. Their breaths came out in clouds, their skin raw and red. When one human stumbled, another helped them up. No one was left behind. By the time they reached the base again, the rescuers could barely stand. But they had done it. All 4 aliens survived. The rescued crew looked at their saviors in disbelief. They had been taught that humans were primitive, dangerous creatures from a deadly planet. But what they saw that night was something else entirely: selflessness, courage, and love. When the storm finally ended 3 days later, the Antarctic world was silent again. The base was damaged but still standing. The Aerith were shaken but alive. And the humans, exhausted, frostbitten, and bruised, were smiling. Valan called a meeting. "We came here to study your bodies," he said. "But we have seen something greater. We saw how you face death not with fear but with fire. You risk yourselves for others, even those who are not your kind. This is what makes your species powerful." Leah looked at him quietly and said, "That's just being human." Karth stepped forward and said softly, "No, it is more than that. You are Deathworlders, yes, but not because your planet tries to kill you. You are Deathworlders because you refuse to die." For a long time, no one spoke. Outside, the snow sparkled under the sun, calm again. The storm had tested them all. The aliens had come to study survival, but they had witnessed something much deeper: the spirit that turned fragile creatures into legends. And though the galaxy was far away on that frozen corner of Earth, a group of beings who had once thought themselves superior finally understood the truth. The real power of Deathworlders wasn't in their bodies or their technology. It was in their hearts. The storm had passed, but the world it left behind was silent and broken. The white land of Antarctica looked peaceful again, but everything was changed. The base stood half buried under snow, the walls cracked and the machines covered in frost. Inside, both humans and aliens moved slowly, weak from exhaustion and cold. Yet there was a strange feeling in the air, something beyond fear or relief. It was respect, the kind that only comes when life and death have stood side by side. Leah Morgan sat near the heater, her injured arm tied in a sling. She watched the aliens working quietly with the humans, fixing damaged wires and sealing broken windows. The Aerith, who had once looked at humans with cautious curiosity, now followed their lead. They no longer gave orders. They listened. The humans in turn treated them like equals, sometimes teasing them, sometimes teaching them, always helping. Karth moved from one station to another, trying to repair a power cell. His hand still trembled from the cold, but his mind was restless. The things he had seen in the storm haunted him. He had seen humans carrying injured aliens through freezing winds, refusing to stop even when their own bodies were failing. He had seen Leah bleeding and still smiling. He had seen Diego collapse from exhaustion only to stand again because someone else needed him. For the Aerith, these things were unthinkable. On their homeworld, no one suffered for another. Pain was avoided, not shared. That morning, Karth walked up to Leah. "You should be resting," he said. "Your injury is serious." Leah smiled faintly. "Rest can wait. We've got a lot to fix." "You saved many lives," he said quietly. "Why risk your own for strangers?" She looked at him and said, "Because that's what makes us human. We fight for each other." "That's our way," Karth tilted his head. "But you gain nothing. You could have died." "Maybe," she said softly. "But if I die helping someone else live, that's not a waste. That's the best thing I can do." He didn't answer. There was no logic in her words, yet there was truth, something that went beyond logic. In the next few days, the alien systems began to recover. The signal to their fleet was restored, and the ships in orbit confirmed that the storm had been one of the most powerful magnetic disturbances ever recorded. The Aerith scientists wrote long reports full of data about temperature, wind speed, and radiation. But all of that was meaningless compared to what they had witnessed. Valan, the alien leader, gathered his team. "We have learned what no book could have taught us," he said. "The Deathworlders are not strong because of their world. Their strength comes from their spirit. They defy their planet's cruelty not with machines but with will." He looked around the room at the tired, smiling humans. "We have much to learn from them." The aliens had arrived believing they were the teachers. Now they were the students. They began to observe not the body but the heart. They asked questions that made no sense in science. Why do humans cry? Why do they laugh even when they are in pain? Why do they forgive? Leah tried to explain. "We cry because we feel too much. We laugh because we need to. And we forgive because we know how it feels to be broken." At first, the aliens could not understand such ideas. On their planet, emotion was controlled and regulated. But here, in this frozen human base, they saw something new. Emotion wasn't weakness, it was power. It made humans unpredictable, yes, but also unstoppable. One night after repairs were done, everyone gathered in the main hall. The humans started a small fire in a steel barrel and sat around it, talking softly. Someone brought out a guitar and a few began to sing. The melody was slow and sad but warm. The aliens watched in silence. Karth asked Leah, "Why sing now? You have suffered. Should you not be silent and recover?" Leah looked into the fire and said, "Singing helps us heal. It reminds us we're still alive." The aliens listened to the song, a simple tune about light and hope. For the first time in their lives, they felt something strange inside them, a tightness in their chest, a kind of ache they couldn't name. It wasn't fear. It wasn't sadness. It was something deeper. When the song ended, Karth whispered, "It is beautiful." Leah smiled. "It's called hope." From that moment, something changed in the Aerith. They began to smile awkwardly, to try small jokes, to work with more warmth in their movements. They started learning from the humans, not as observers, but as friends. Then another challenge came. One of the alien energy cells began to leak radiation, something that could kill them all if not contained. The Aerith froze in panic. Their protocols told them to evacuate immediately. But Leah and her team didn't run. They grabbed tools and protective suits. "We fix it or we all die," Raj said simply. Karth stopped them. "You cannot do this. The radiation levels are too high." Leah turned to him, eyes steady. "We can handle it. We've dealt with worse." Karth shook his head. "You always say that, but why must you risk yourselves every time?" Leah gave a tired smile. "Because every time we risk something, we prove that fear doesn't own us." The humans entered the room where the energy cell was sparking. The air shimmered with danger. They moved carefully, sealing leaks and rerouting power. Minutes felt like hours. Karth couldn't just stand by, he ran to help. The moment he stepped inside, pain shot through his body. But beside the humans, he worked anyway. When it was over, the cell was stable again. The danger had passed. Leah collapsed to her knees, coughing. Karth helped her up. "Why did you let me help?" he asked weakly. "Because," she said, gasping for breath, "you wanted to understand us. Now you do." That night, Karth sat alone, watching the frozen horizon through the window. The stars sparkled faintly, distant and cold. He thought about his world, so safe, so perfect, so empty. Then he thought about Earth, wild, cruel, full of pain, yet full of life. And he finally understood what made humans so different. They didn't just live, they chose to live, even when everything around them screamed not to. Over the next few weeks, as the aliens repaired their ship and prepared to leave, they spent their days learning from the humans. They asked to join in their routines, building, cooking, even joking. One alien tried coffee for the first time and nearly fell over from the taste. The humans laughed, and soon the aliens began to laugh too, their strange voices echoing in the icy hall. Karth began keeping a journal, something no Aerith had ever done. He wrote not about data or numbers, but about feelings. "Humans," he wrote, "are creatures of contradiction. They fear death yet run toward danger. They are fragile but unbreakable. They suffer but still find joy. They live on a world that tries to destroy them, and they call it home." Before leaving, Valan held a final meeting with Leah and her team. "We came to study your survival," he said. But we found something greater. You have shown us what courage truly means. You have taught us that strength is not the absence of fear. It is the will to move forward despite it." Leah nodded, smiling softly. "That's what keeps us going. We don't have control over nature or fate or death, but we can choose how we face them." Karth looked at her, his dark eyes shining. "And that choice makes you Deathworlders." The day came when the Aerith ship was ready to depart. The humans stood outside, waving as the sleek silver vessel rose into the pale sky. Snow swirled around them like glitter. Leah felt a strange sadness. These beings who had once been strangers now felt like family. Inside the ship, Karth watched Earth grow smaller beneath him. He touched the cold glass of the window and whispered, "The Death World, the living miracle." When the Aerith returned to their homeworld, they carried more than data. They carried stories. The story of humans who built fire and ice, who laughed in storms, who saved others before themselves. The story of a planet that bred not monsters but heroes. The Aerith Council listened as Valan gave his report. "The humans are dangerous," he said, "but not because of their weapons or their aggression. They are dangerous because they refuse to surrender. Even in the face of death, they keep moving. That is their true power." Karth added quietly, "They call themselves human, but in truth they are something more. They are hope in its purest form." Back on Earth, Leah stood outside the base one last time, watching the night sky. The wind was cold but gentle now. She thought about the storm, the pain, and the strange friendships that had grown from it. Somewhere out there, she knew, a group of aliens was telling others about humanity, not as monsters from a deadly world, but as beings who had mastered the art of survival through heart and spirit. She smiled to herself and whispered into the cold air, "Now they know what Deathworlders really are." And in that quiet, frozen place beneath a sky full of stars, the truth echoed like a promise. The true power of Deathworlders was not their strength, not their endurance, but their compassion, their unity, and their unbreakable will to keep living, no matter how hard the world became. Months had passed since the storm that had nearly ended everything. Antarctica was slowly returning to its calm, frozen beauty, and the human base had been repaired and strengthened. The white land stretched endlessly in every direction, silent except for the low hum of the generators and the soft crunch of boots on snow. Life had settled into a steady rhythm again, but something inside every person who had survived had changed forever. Leah Morgan stood outside the base, her breath turning into white mist. She looked up at the endless sky, remembering the silver ship that had left weeks ago. The aliens, the Aerith, had gone home, but they had left behind memories that no one could ever forget. The cold wind brushed her face and she smiled faintly, whispering to herself, "I hope they remember us." Inside the base, things were different now. The humans worked with new energy and pride. They had learned more about themselves in those terrifying days than in all their years of research. Diego had recovered from his injuries, though he still joked about his frozen ribs. Raj was already building a new communication tower, stronger than before, while Leah spent hours writing detailed notes, not just about the storm, but about the strange friendship that had formed between species. The world outside the base was no longer just ice and danger. It had become a symbol, a reminder of what humans could endure and what they could become when pushed to the edge. One morning the radio crackled with static and everyone froze. Then a familiar voice came through. "This is Aerith Vessel Orthal calling Human Research Base 7. Leah's heart leapt. She grabbed the transmitter. "This is Leah Morgan. Karth, is that you?" A faint laugh came through. "It is. I thought it would be impossible to reach you again. We are orbiting Earth once more." The entire team gathered around the radio. Leah felt a rush of emotions she couldn't describe. Joy, surprise, a strange sense of pride. "You came back?" "Yes," said Karth. "We have returned with our leaders. They wish to speak with your people. They want to understand more about you, about Deathworlders." Within hours, word spread across the planet. For the first time in history, humans were not just meeting aliens, they were meeting friends from another world who admired them. Governments scrambled to arrange contact, and soon the skies above Antarctica were filled again with light as the Aerith ships descended, sleek and silent, their silver hulls gleaming in the sun. When the ships landed, the humans stood outside waiting. Leah, Diego, Raj, and the rest of the team watched as the doors opened and the aliens stepped out. They looked the same, tall, elegant, with dark, glass-like eyes, but there was something new in their movements. They walked not with superiority, but with humility. Karth stepped forward, smiling in his strange way. "We miss the cold," he said. Leah laughed. "No one misses this cold." Behind him, Valan, the Aerith leader, bowed his head. "We came to honor our promise. We told our council about you, about what you showed us. They did not believe at first, so we brought them here, to see your world for themselves." That day, history was written in silence. Humans and aliens stood side by side on the frozen land, no longer enemies or strangers, but equals. The Aerith scientists walked carefully across the ice, touching the snow, breathing the sharp air, and studying the humans not as specimens, but as wonders. Inside the base, both species shared stories. The aliens showed recordings of their home world, vast cities made of crystal, oceans that glowed under twin suns, forests that sang when the wind passed through. The humans showed them simple things: a photo of a family, a small plant growing under a light, a mug of hot coffee. The Aerith were fascinated by these small human treasures. Karth picked up a photograph of Leah and her team, taken after the storm. "You keep images of your pain and survival?" he asked. Leah nodded. "We keep them to remember how far we've come." He looked at the photo for a long time. "We erase our pain," he said quietly. "Perhaps that is why we never learned to be strong." Later, the humans invited the aliens to share a meal. It was simple: soup, bread, and a few fruits, but the Aerith treated it like a feast. They had never shared food this way before. "Eating together," Leah explained, "is how we build trust." Karth tasted the soup carefully. "It is warm," he said, "not just in temperature, but in feeling." Everyone laughed, but his words were true. The warmth of the meal wasn't just from the food. It came from the people sitting together, talking, smiling, living. That night, under the clear Antarctic sky, humans and aliens stood outside watching the stars. The aurora danced in waves of green and blue, lighting up the snow like magic. Valan looked at the shimmering sky and said, "We once thought you were dangerous because your world is full of death. But now I see, you are powerful because you live beside death and still find beauty." Leah turned to him. "We call it hope. It's what keeps us alive." For a moment no one spoke. The cold wind blew softly and the sky shimmered like a dream. Then Karth said, "We want to take that hope with us. We want to teach it to our people." In the following weeks, humans and Aerith began a true exchange of science, culture, and stories. The aliens shared their advanced technology, helping Earth develop clean energy and better medicine. The humans shared something deeper: art, music, laughter, courage, and compassion. Karth spent hours studying human books, trying to understand emotions. "Your stories," he said one evening, "are strange. They are full of pain and loss, yet they always end with light." "Why?" Leah smiled. "Because that's what we believe in. No matter how dark it gets, there's always a way forward." One day, as the sun dipped low, Karth walked to the edge of the ice shelf. Leah followed him. He looked out at the frozen ocean and said, "Do you know what our people call you now?" She shook her head. "What?" He looked at her and said softly, "The children of the fire, because you carry warmth even in the coldest place." Leah laughed, but there were tears in her eyes. "That's beautiful." When it was finally time for the Aerith to leave again, the base was filled with mixed emotions. Humans hugged their alien friends, something the Aerith had at first found strange but now returned clumsily, their long arms wrapping around the humans with surprising gentleness. Valan stood before the crowd. "We came here seeking knowledge," he said. "We found something greater. You have taught us that true power is not in weapons or technology, but in the heart. The Deathworlders have shown us what it means to live." Leah smiled at him. "And you showed us we're not alone in the universe." The ships lifted off slowly, their engines glowing softly. The humans waved as they rose higher and higher, until they were just dots against the pale sky. For a long time, Leah stood there watching. She felt both sadness and peace. The aliens were gone, but something told her they would return. Weeks later, messages began arriving from across the world. The Aerith had shared their story of Earth with other species. The galaxy, once full of fear about the Deathworlders, now spoke their name with awe and admiration. Humans had become a symbol, not of danger but of courage and compassion. Scientists from both worlds started working together. A joint base was planned, half human, half Aerith, where knowledge would flow freely between them. The humans called it the Bridge, a name that meant connection, not conquest. One evening, Leah stood on the ice again, looking at the stars. Diego joined her, holding 2 mugs of hot coffee. "Think they'll come back?" he asked. She smiled. "They will. They always keep their promises." He nodded, sipping his drink. "You ever think about what they said? About us being the children of the fire?" Leah looked up at the glowing aurora. "Yeah," she whispered. "Maybe they're right. No matter how dark or cold it gets, we always find a way to make light." The wind picked up, carrying her words into the night, somewhere far beyond the stars on the Aerith home world. Karth looked up at his own sky and thought of Earth. He remembered the laughter, the songs, the pain, and the strange, beautiful humans who had changed everything. In his journal, he wrote one last entry. "The Deathworlders live where no one else dares. They walk hand in hand with death, yet they smile. They are proof that life is stronger than fear. And when we lose our way, we will look to their world and remember, the fire still burns." Back on Earth, Leah closed her eyes, feeling the cold wind brush against her face. The stars above seemed brighter now, almost alive. She whispered into the night, "Goodbye, my friends. Until we meet again." And as the world turned beneath the stars, the story of that frozen land became legend. It was told not just on Earth, but across distant planets, of the day aliens witnessed the true power of Deathworlders, and discovered that the greatest force in the universe was not strength or intelligence or technology. It was the heart of a human being.